Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, and along with me, as always, my esteemed colleague, Dr. Joe Hamlett. How are you doing this morning, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing pretty good, Dr. Dave. How are you doing?
Excellent, excellent, excellent. And for those of you who are just joining us for your first time or returning to the show, this is your personal, professional, and career development podcast. And this week's guest speaker is Dennis Nitschke. How are you doing this morning, Dennis?
Yeah, well, the pronunciation is harder than that. It's Nitschke.
Nitschke.
Oh,
I knew I was going to mess it up.
I know,
Nitschke.
Dave. You have to know me for 100 years.
Yeah.
No, I'm doing quite well.
Excellent, excellent. So before we jump into the topic, Dennis, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself real quick?
Okay, I'm in Arizona now, but I retired from the United States Army 2004. Had a couple of churches. I'm a Army chaplain, retired. Taught high school here in Sierra Vista for 6 years. And then that's how I met you, as being with the Serco, facilitating, helping people make a transition from military to civilian. And I'm fully retiring the end of this month of June, and just gonna garden, raise chickens, and travel, pretty much.
That sounds like a great plan to me.
Absolutely.
All right. So for today's topic is getting along. And so when we talk about getting along, what does that mean to you, Dennis? When we talk about getting along, we'd kind of explored this a little bit before we start recording. So when we think about that, what does that mean to you?
I'm going to save the chicken stuff for a little later, but truly, you guys, when we were talking about, you don't have to like somebody to work together. And I think that's, again, being clergy, there's a phrase in scripture, basically, where I don't have to love any of you. I mean, I don't have to like any of you. I don't have to like any of you, but I have to love you. And that's the difference in getting along. You know, everybody says, if you act like me, this is what I see is a lot. If you act like me, then I'll like you. You don't act like me, then I won't like you. I'll hate you. Okay, I'll diss you. But the thing is, if you love each other, you know, and I'm talking about caring, love each other. It doesn't matter the difference. You work it out and care for one another. We have a new neighbor. I'm looking at his house from my window. He's retiring in about a month from the Air Force, and young guy, family, and he needed something for taking care of his yard. And I just happened to say, hey, I have one of those. And I just gave it to him. I hadn't known him now. At that point, I probably knew him maybe 20 minutes. So, you know, I don't have to have a big relationship with the guy, test him to see if he's going to be honest. He's my neighbor. Yeah. So I think that's a start.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit of agape love, the love of loving others.
Yeah.
And there's nothing romantic or anything like that. It's just loving people for the sake of loving people. You know, like being a teacher, you teach because you love to teach.
Right.
And that's a great point to bring up, because, you know, as we talk and explore, you know, getting along with each other, you know, we really do have to think about that. What does that mean? You know, why do we not get along? How do we get along? What type of getting along are we doing? You know, is it just a facade to, you know, hey, how you doing? High five. And then, you know, that's it, you know, or you don't even acknowledge each other when you pass each other in the hallway type thing. Or is it, you know, a mutual respect and kindness? So,
You know, Dave, that's exactly what I was thinking about, the mutual respect. Again, you know, we like to think that we could love each other and care for one another. But if we can't get to that level, at least, you know, display respect for one another. Like it's just like you said, just something as simple as saying hi as you walk by someone versus just acting like you don't see them. So yeah, we don't have to go to the extremes if we don't feel like we need to, because that's what you were talking about before.
Right.
Putting together this team, we don't necessarily. Again, we just have to get along enough to be cordial with one another and all those things, because we all have a mission or objective that we're trying to complete. So if we can all align on that, then that starts that relationship of getting along, and maybe to extend it or further it beyond that. But initially, I think that one of the biggest things is that respect for one another.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was thinking, when you said that mutual respect piece, it reminded me of, one of those things that, you see it online every now and then, just say hi to someone, because just saying
Right.
hi to them, acknowledge them, could change their entire life. You don't know what's going on with them. They could be having a bad day, a bad life, a bad week, whatever. And just acknowledging them can bring them out of their funk or out of that moment for just a moment. And
Right.
maybe that's all they need, is that acknowledgement and mutual respect to get them back on track.
Right. Yep.
So let's keep going with getting along here. So we've talked about the mutual respect. Let's look at this from like a professional development perspective. Like Dennis said, Dennis and I met doing military transition briefings, and we were usually the ones that were off camera, texting and making light of things, which was always that was the best part of the meetings, most of them. So, but in the briefings, you get to learn a lot about people. Joe and I've mentioned this before, and we've already mentioned it. All three of us are veterans, and that's it used to be during World War II. I think it was like near 8% or something like that of the population, and it's dwindled down. And when we went in, it was around 2 to 3%, and now it's less than 1% of the United States population is in the military at any one given time, and that perspective is different. And we talk about mutual respect of others, and when you transition from the military or from a job, from one career to another career, or one industry to another, for whatever reason, you may have been displaced, it may not have just been working out, it's not what you wanted to do when you grow up, and it's understanding what that takes to get along. I mean, because you're meeting people for just a few minutes, or several minutes during an interview or a phone conversation, and how do you get along enough and communicate that to show that you are a team player, and and if that person isn't being genuine, are you observant enough to pick up on that? That was a lot I just
That
threw
sure
out there.
was. But um, you mentioned we're all veterans. When we first came in our first unit, we were nobodies. I was a PV3 or PFC actually, and came in, drafted, and you walk in and they say, "Okay, this is your job," and they had you had the responsibility to do the job. They had the respect that said, "Hey, you were trained to do that job." And then later on, I became a drill instructor. They didn't say, "Hey, you're just a kid." In fact, I was so young. When I went and had party, at the end of the week, we'd have a beer together. I was only 19, and I had one of my soldiers go buy me a beer so that I could go drink with them. But they respected me because that was my position,
Right.
and then you acted out of that authority and that respect. You didn't just lord it over them. Now, what Joe was talking about, the civilian world, when I went in to over the years, I did other things, but my last 6 before COVID, I was teaching high school. I came into high school. I knew the subject. I was a social studies teacher. I knew the U.S. History and U.S. Constitution. I didn't know economics, and I hated teaching it. And but the whole thing is, I came in, and it was like, oh, and I was the oldest teacher there, and it was like, oh, you're the new guy, and and they treated me like, you know how to use a pencil? Do you know how to use a computer? And
Wow.
and then I came in and said, you know, um, I did a lot more stuff in my life than you've done that impacts on people. But I didn't say that to them. I
Right.
showed it to them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then they go, how come you always have a good uh, rapport? How come you have this? Because I don't come in with a judgment. And there's,
Right.
it's like telling a kid, that's a stupid kid or that's a troubling kid.
Right.
Well, if you start it and you say, yeah, you're stupid, he's gonna be. But I
Absolutely.
had such fun. I mean, I could tell you stories that my kids would come into my classroom at lunch and eat lunch just to be around the environment because I had music on all the time. I had a little store. I didn't sell them anything. I gave them tickets for being good. So I lost money both sides. But they came in because they said, "Hey, we have some." And now those kids are in their 20s and they're corporate leaders
Oh, wow.
or super financial planners.
Right.
I have one just down the street. She's a county employee that runs all kinds of stuff for low income. I mean, they've just branched out, and I don't think a lot of them would have done that if people didn't say, "Hey, don't judge them." That I didn't get.
Right.
My if I'd have wallowed in my judgment at the high school, I don't think I'd been effective. I think we got to get past me. I'm not important. You know.
Well, Dennis, you bring up a very good point, and I think this is one of the challenges. Again, all of us are veterans that a lot of veterans face is the fact when you're trying to talk about your experiences, a lot of times it falls on deaf ears because in most cases, a lot of people can't relate, so they sometimes choose not to try and understand. And you're right, a lot of times it's that judgment, and then they bring you in and you're right, take you to the very basics. This is your first job because you were in the military all those years, so it doesn't align with corporate America, so
Yeah.
we got to teach you. And that's been a challenge for me. I know, just again because all the things that we've all accomplished, and then we go in front of a person that's on the other side, probably half of our age, and we've been working longer than they've been alive, but this is how we're being treated. So I think that's what you said about the judgment piece. That changes a lot of things. If people already automatically label you, then you're right. That's what you're going to continue to think. That's who you are. That's all you're capable of. I can never be anything else. And unfortunately, a lot of people are put in that position where they're dictated what they can do, what they can be. And me and Dave have talked about this a lot. Define what your own success is. But sometimes, if that's all you've heard your entire life, then it's hard to overcome that. So
Yeah.
that judgment piece is very detrimental for people to be able to grow, to develop, because they're already, you know, already probably feeling self-conscious, don't believe they can do it anyway. And then that's all they hear. And then that kind of just eliminates that chance for them to take that first step and to try it. So I think that's again, um, unfortunate that you had to go through that experience, like you say, that they're trying to teach you how to use a pencil, how to. I mean, you may have been joking about it, but to the fact that that's kind of what it felt like, though, that you had never done any of these things, and that's just unfortunate that a lot of us have to experience that. And it's not just a military veteran; it's someone that come from a different background.
Yeah.
If you were in banking your entire life and now you go into another environment, again, they're going to treat you. They're going to
I was
disregard all the
just going to,
experiences that you
you read
have.
my mind, Joe. You read my mind. It's like, it doesn't make sense to me to essentially disqualify someone's experience because you have not had the same experience or the same
Right.
industry. And it's not just military to civilian. It could be from government to retail. It could be corporate to entrepreneurship. People look at you differently and they judge you differently based upon their own preconceived notions
Right.
and upbringings and
Yeah.
biases. And it's not a negative thing. A lot of that's inherent biases and prejudices because of the way we brought up. I grew up in the farmland, and going to the big city, that wasn't the big city, air quotes, was not a big city. It was a town. That was my big city. And now, you can go to a large metropolitan area, and it's like you realize that sort of thing, and you try to understand, how am I supposed to fit in, or how am I supposed to meet the expectations that other people have if I'm not familiar with that environment, even though I still have the skill sets that are transferable. What do we do to help ease that and facilitate that relationship building, that that getting along piece.
Yeah. That's interesting you say that, Dave, but, and Joe, I appreciate you said, the part where, not just veterans, but look, you guys aren't that old, but look at 2008 and how the housing market went to pot. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And people lost jobs. And there were guys in our town here, even, and across the nation, who had PhDs, who had, they were managers, directors, and division heads of different companies. And they just said, hey, this company's gone. We had guys on the post who were making 6 figures because they were drone heads. They were running, they did all the stuff for drones flying around and stuff.
Yeah.
I can't remember what they're called. Anyway, but you had all those people, and then all this, and then they said, my importance is gone. I'm not making that money. I'm not doing this. But then they turned around and they're back, and their wives are looking at them, their husbands are looking at them, their kids are looking at them, their dog's sitting there looking at them, and they go, someone's going to feed me. Someone's got to house me. And so they go work at McDonald's and stuff. They go work at Olive Garden or whatever. And I'm not knocking this guy. I'm just, but they came out of where they were business to now they're in labor. And a lot of those guys were busted. They were so depressed. Here I have all this, and I can't do that. Well, situation says you can't, but situation didn't say, go lay down on the ground and die. And I've saw some of those guys turn around, and they didn't quite make it, maybe initially go right back to the place where they were powerful or whatever, but they got to where they said, I'm going to quit worrying about me. And it goes with the agape love thing that Dave said, is that they became servant leaders. And that whole thing is leadership. That's what I brought into the school. They had no leaders.
Right.
And so I just said, hey, I'm going to show you how you can be a better servant by me showing you how to lead people to accomplish stuff. And I think what we're dealing with now is too much involves me. It goes even to say hello, like we were talking earlier. I'm walking down the mall, just at the mall or something, and they say, hi, how you doing? And they go, yeah, fine, or whatever. No, hey, how are you really doing? And they go, what? So there's a lot that people have to get rid of their importance, and they're being fed, I guess would be a good word, so that all of us are important. Everybody. I don't know. I can't really explain it, but I think you did a good job.
Yeah, I picked up on something that you mentioned, and I think it is a great point. Everyone has their own perception of what success is. And once you feel that you're doing that, whatever level of the organization or environment that you're in, you feel like you've accomplished something, and then to lose that,
Yep.
That's not taught. That's not taught anywhere. And that's what I think part of that getting along is understanding that sometimes people are in positions, and maybe it's not their first or second choice, but they're making the best out of the situation that they have.
Yeah.
And we all know people that have been displaced. Some of us have been displaced ourselves, and for people who have not been displaced, it's I think it's hard, again, if you haven't been displaced or you haven't experienced something, what that feels like. There is a certain amount of trauma with that, because one day you have a job and you're doing one thing, and hopefully you like it, and then 2 weeks later, or an hour later, you're not. What do you do? And that's why Joe and I have this show, is to help people understand, it's not the end of the road when
No.
that happens. And to your point, just don't lay down and curl up into a ball. Well, you can, but just don't stay there very long. Have
Yeah.
your morning period, but then um, get through that morning and stand up and figure it out. You have to keep that positive, that positive, optimistic attitude, because so much about getting along is being positive and not trying to find the worst in people,
Right.
finding the best in them, and understanding that, to your point that you mentioned earlier, Dennis, is that maybe it was a bad day, maybe it was a bad week. How do we get past that and just get along and treat each other with kindness? And yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, when Dennis talked about, you laying down and not accepting it, and we've done a podcast on something very similar to that, whether you become the victim or the victor.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you can be displaced or things not go your way, and you can choose to lay down and accept it, or you can overcome. Like Dave said, you definitely, experience that mourning period, but then also pick yourself back up and keep moving forward. And like they mentioned, some of us have been displaced more than others. Some people have never been displaced. So
Mm-hmm.
for that first time, it could feel like that they're total failure, that this happened to them. But in my case, where it's happened more than once,
Mm-hmm.
you start to kind of grow calluses from having to do this over and over again. So it gets you in a position where you can recover quicker, you can shake it off and move on. But again, I am empathetic that people the first time, they may not be able to do that as readily.
Mm-hmm.
So again, understanding someone else's experience of being empathetic to realize this could have been detrimental to them, and in my case it could have been too, but like I said, I've had practice now and been able to come back. So that's why I
Sometimes
know
willing practice and sometimes unwilling practice.
right, but I know I can overcome it. So like they said, that's what we try to help other people with.
Mm-hmm.
They may be experiencing it for the first time, and we're again just here to let them know you can overcome it, you can get through it, you can put that foot in front of you again and start over if you have to.
Yeah. And when bad things happen to people, sometimes there's a bitterness there. Just don't allow that to take over, your the conversation in your head. I mean, because then you start judging others, and that's what when we talk about getting along, maybe someone hasn't been displaced, maybe they have been displaced, maybe they just get along because they know each other or friends. But for that new person in that environment, whether it's a new team in the same company, a new job, new industry, whatever, to Joe's point, there's got to be some empathy there. I mean, we're all human beings. We get, it's not difficult to get along. It's really, really not that difficult. It's not difficult at all, really. It's just it's our own perceptions and our own judgments that cloud our judgment on what getting along looks like. And it really does boil down to that kindness piece, that Dennis brought up early on in the conversation.
Speaking of the kindness, I'm going to get a kind of a real example that happens to me a lot. I do a lot of things on the phone. I make appointments with a doctor. I make appointments for travel. I make appointments for various things, right? And I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but let's say your phone company, you make it, and you get your new phones and stuff, and you get your new bill, and your new bill is like the national debt. And you were promised that it would be very, very much smaller. So you
Right.
call the company up, and I'm not going to mention the company, but you call the company up, ABC company, and you get somebody, and you're mad. I mean, you're just ticked off. I said, "What is this bill?" And you start yelling, and everybody, she's all upset, and you're yelling, And you go, what are you going to do about it? And you have those conversations. You hear people have those conversations. And you go, what are you going to do about it? But I used to be like that. I used to be, hey, your company stiffed me, and now you're going to change it. But now, over the years, I call up, I ask them their name. I ask them where they're at. I called my phone company a few months ago, about a year ago, and I found the lady was from Montana. And I go, man, because she was working at home. So I talked to her and I said, so my wife's from Montana. She goes, really? And I go, yeah, and we're talking. And then I said something about gardening. She goes, and it was winter. She goes, my strawberries love the cold. And I go, I have strawberries. And so, and and we're working the money part too, at the same time. And so she fixed it, whatever it was for the phone company. And I said, hey, I appreciate it. Hey, good, hope have a great holiday, Christmas and all that. So it was around that time. Well, then a few months ago, I had another issue, not as bad, but they charged me twice for something. So I called up and I get the same. I mean, can you imagine? I get the same
The odds. Yeah.
I'm this is a national company. And I said,
not just 4 people in customer service.
and I go, how the strawberries? And she goes, you're that guy. And and both of us left. That's the way people get along.
Right.
You're not gonna. I can beat Joe. Joe, I can call you up and I can beat you over the phone, and you're not gonna feel it except in your heart. Where if I leave you with a good feeling that, hey, that guy cared about me, or I feel good, that's what we're all about. If we had more people feeling that way or acting that way, I think we'd be doing some really good work.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, so we're winding down. We've got a couple minutes left. So I'm gonna ask Joe, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think we've touched on a lot of different things when it comes to getting along. And I think one of the things that was highlighted from the very beginning is the respect piece, and then treating each other as humans. Again, we talked about it. People, we don't know what people are going through, and like Dennis with his story, just maybe brighten somebody's day that he remembered they remember the conversation they had, in their initial conversation. So just we just don't know how we're impacting people. So all of us probably experience some days where we're not having a good day, and like Dennis said, he might call me and I walk away saying that dude, So again, just really keeping in mind that we all want to do what's right. We want to be the best we can be. So if we can continue to think in that mindset, I think we'll all be in a position where we can work together. So
that's awesome. Dennis, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Raise chickens.
Raise chickens.
Get yourself a bunch of egg-laying chickens. Don't get any roosters, and watch them make you happy.
That is a great way to end the show. I have nothing to say with that. I mean, that's awesome. That's awesome. So with that, we'd like to thank our viewers and listeners for joining us on another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, your personal, professional, and career development podcast. We'd like to thank Dennis Nitschke for joining us. It was a great show. I really enjoyed catching up with you, Dennis, and appreciate you taking time out of your day to humor us with being a guest speaker on our podcast. So with that, again, we'd like to thank our viewers and listeners. If you have any ideas or topics, like, share, there's a contact info down there for you. Visit our website. We've got episodes that, dozens and dozens and dozens of episodes for you to reflect on and enjoy listening to. And with that, we want you to keep on being your not so ordinary you.
There you go.